Welcome to the Change the Game podcast, where we are changing the game by doing business differently and highlighting stories of capitalism at its best. I'm Steve Baker, and with me is Rich Armstrong, head coach and co-author of our new book, Get in the Game, How to Create Rapid Financial Results and Lasting Cultural Change. Hello, Rich.
Hey, Steve, how are you today?
Well, I'm excellent because my economic outlook is looking up, because today we've got a very special guest. It's Jackie Greene. She's the vice president of economics at ITR Economics. Now, listeners of ours know ITR. They're big believers, but for those of you who are new, ITR provides the best economic intelligence for great game companies. And of course, companies that aren't playing the great game, but you can reduce your risk and drive your practical and profitable business decisions. They also lead the industry with their proven forecasts with an astounding 95% accuracy. Jackie Greene, welcome to the podcast.
Why, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, Jackie, our listeners have met Alan at the conference over the years and maybe even heard Brian speaking, that sort of thing. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been with ITR since 2005, so I've been here quite a while. Over those time periods, I've done lots of different things on the econ team. I've worked my way up from the very bottom, frankly. And during that time, I have worked with some of our great clients. I've gotten to learn so many new industries that way. These days, I'm more focused on working on our core forecasts that really drive a lot of our overall economic thought and then drive our company forecasts. So it's a lot more of the thought leadership team here at ITR, setting the big picture for the coming business cycles. It's really exciting.
That's
for an
cool.
econ nerd. Okay, I qualify. It's exciting for an econ nerd.
I like to pretend I'm on the thought leadership team here at Great Games, so it's great to meet a peer. So you work with companies taking that intelligence and translating it, that the realities of the world economy, and helping companies understand what it means for their business strategy. Could you tell us just a little bit about like what a typical interaction would be with one of your clients?
Certainly. So for a lot of our clients, we forecast either their business themselves, so their revenue, their sales, their units, whatever the case may be, or we'll forecast their markets or some combination therein. A lot of the times what we're doing is we'll present them a forecast based on what they're doing right now. And it's generally a 3-year outlook so that they can make better decisions. Our goal is always for our clients to prove us wrong. I know it sounds kind of silly because we love our accuracy rating on our forecast, but we want them to prove us wrong. We want them to be able to take the information we're giving them about what markets are going to be outperforming and which ones are going to be better for them over the next few years so that they truly can beat the forecast. Years ago, I was at a client visit and I was standing there talking to the group in the boardroom. And I think I had projected they were going to be up 2% or something like that. And I remember very clearly when the gentleman in the room was frustrated with me. He said, "You were wrong." I said, "How was I wrong?" He said, "We grew 3% instead of 2%. I said, "Okay." So last time I was here, we talked about some of the things you could do to do better than my forecast, right? He said, "Well, yes." I said, "Did you do those things?" He said, "Well, yes." I said, "So why are you mad at me?" That's what we're supposed to do. So that's what I love doing.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, that's a really good example. And, you know, SRC, our parent company here at Great Game of Business, has been, you know, a fan, as Steve said, for many years, maybe over 20 years. And our CEO and many of the business units use ITR as a perfect guide to basically work our long-term planning at SRC. Can you give us some examples of, you know, maybe going a little deeper than what you just did in terms of how companies do use these forecasts to kind of guide their long-term planning and their strategic planning specifically?
Certainly. Well, for starters, we have one of our very frequently used tools by clients, which we call an EVP. There's various levels of it, but ultimately what it's doing is it's comparing a company's revenue or sales or whatever they're using to gauge the success of their business to a collection of key leading indicators. These indicators are generally representative of the macroeconomy, of key leading indicators such as our ITR leading indicator, and then their market specific indicators. So if they're in food production and they're also in oil production, those will be indicators that we use there. We then compare them to those indicators. ultimately, we use our forecasting process. We arrive at this forecast and we deliver it to them with these indicators. Part of our consultative program with them, though, is we talk through it. And we talk through this is your forecast if you do nothing different. But we see that food is going to be outperforming oil. Are there things you can shift resources to be capturing more of that, focusing your sales team in that direction, or searching for a new market because we see up ahead of us the 2030 depression sort of time period coming? Start thinking more strategically about how you can be more entrepreneurial and be better positioned for those things. So it depends on the time frame we're working with each account. We look at ways to beat every business cycle. There are still ways to make money and be profitable even during recessions. So that's what we're always trying to help our clients do, is be better prepared so they're not caught off guard. You should always be planning at least half a business cycle ahead. And we use our management objectives that can be found in all of our programs to help set those guidelines and those conversation starters, really, for no matter what phase of the business cycle you're in.
That's very good. Thank you, Jackie.
So actually, Rich, I was thinking you've got a great question that ties right into what Jackie's answer was there. I'd love to skip ahead to that, and then I'll come back and ask about kind of where we are right now.
Okay, great. Jackie, in a recent blog that I just read that ITR put out, I think just this week, you're expecting the core segments of the economy to reach kind of the business peak cycle, right, of kind of accelerated growth we've seen. And I think, everybody's experienced, right, through supply and labor issues. But you see it peaking and then a slower growth through, I think, 23. Can you give us some real world examples of how companies that are going through these business cycles are creating strategies based on these insights? What are some changes you're seeing from businesses, some examples of what they're doing in light of this?
Well, let's look at the supply chain side of things. That's been a very frustrating thing for a lot of people. So some of our clients, what we were working with them on was, if you were offering 100 products and they were competing for resources, but you were seeing that 20% of those product lines were really responsible for 80% of your revenue, but you were having to carry a lot of costs and other resourcing issues to deal with the other 8% of the SKUs that you were offering. Why continue doing it? We have a phrase called lose the losers. It's really not the prettiest of phrase or the friendliest of phrase, but in that instance, it's really focusing on the ones that are going to yield you a higher profit that you can then focus and tailor to those ones, so you're not spread so thin that you're chasing after everything. And that's a big thing to do right now with all the supply chain constraints people have been doing, as well as, I say supply chain issues, but that also tailors into the labor side of things too. If you're struggling to have enough labor to produce all 100 SKUs, and you know that you're going to get the maximum from 20 of those SKUs, focus on those 20 and let go of the other lines that aren't nearly as profitable or as frequently purchased. Is it really worth that extra 1 unit there? If that 99th SKU will get a sale, but if it doesn't exist, the client will still buy one of your other options. Is it really worthwhile?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it totally makes sense. And it's very relevant. I mean, we were just having a conversation with our coaches the other day about the clients they're working with today and trying to find those available resources. And a lot of that product and customer rationalization that you just described was going on, right? This is the time to really look at those customers, look at those products that are probably a lot more effort than return, right? So I think that's just really relevant. Thank you, Jackie.
I am concerned, Rich, that you're listening too closely to Jackie. And when she says lose the losers, you kind of looked my way. I don't understand that fully. But Jackie, let's talk about what things are looking like right now. So it's my understanding that the data for 2021 year end is that we've risen to like by 5.6% on U.S. industrial production. And this is one thing I love about Alan, as he points out, we're still number 2 in manufacturing in the world and number 2 exporter in the world. That's pretty amazing. So all this growth, highest growth rate in a decade. Do you really see that growth continuing?
see growth continuing, but not at that level or that pace, I should say. And there's nothing inherently wrong with the economy in this sense. It's really just that level is unsustainable. I mean, we were fueled by a lot of pent-up demand. We were fueled by some stimulus spending. There was so much going on in there. It's just not sustainable. But we do see the economy growing for the next 3 years. So it's not that we're not going to grow. It's just not going to be at the 5.6% rate. It'll be more like 2.8 in 2022. So it's slowing growth, still growth. You're still going to have some issues that you were facing in the last year, 2 years, but they won't be as drastic. It's kind of that time for people to breathe and catch up and get things back in order while we get prepared and ramp up for the next upswing in the economy.
Absolutely. I have a follow-up on that. So along with that growth, we've experienced inflation, which I think is really funny because when we're talking to large groups and conferences lately, we'll point out that, you know, SRC was born when inflation was 12%. And it's so like, as Alan always puts it, go hug an old person. You know, they went through some rough stuff. And so inflation is at a 40-year high, you know, which is, of course, right back to SRC's birth 40 years ago. How is this going to affect spending and business growth this year in 22?
Well, it's impacting things in a couple different ways. So it depends on what side of the coin we're looking at. For one, if we're looking at dollar denominated series such as new orders or wholesale trade or construction or retail sales,
yes,
that inflation number is being felt in there. It's amplifying some of those growth trends, but there is still real growth going on. It's not purely inflation escalating these numbers. It is real growth. It's just getting some boost from inflation.
Yes.
Now for 22 and 23, we're expecting disinflation. So that doesn't mean deflation. There's a very careful distinction there that prices will still go up, but they will not be going up at this crazy rate that everyone's been seeing and fretting about. We're going on the backside of the business cycle. It's going to be slowing. And we're already seeing that happening in some of the components, actually, primarily in the commodities. We're seeing those trends already starting to develop. The leading indicators are very clearly pointing to this trend occurring. We're starting to see the early signals of it, shall we say.
Of disinflation.
Yes. So you can very confidently expect slowing rates of inflation in 22 and 23.
I just wanted to emphasize that word because it's something that our listeners could benefit from, right? Because it's easy for people to throw around terms like deflation, but that's a very scary term compared to disinflation from how you just described it. So that's great. And I like how you separated kind of here's the spending side and here's the inflation side of growth. And then there's the real organic growth within. So pulling those apart helps, I think, me understand a little bit more about, okay, I can see why things would back off a little bit in the next couple of years. Got it. Thank you.
Certainly. And there's different things you can do for your own business to be better utilizing it, for lack of a better term, at the moment. Like if you are currently setting pricing for different things, you're going to have a better time putting through price increases during the first half of this year than the second half because of that disinflation trend. The numbers are high right now. Everyone can easily understand it. But as that disinflation trend develops throughout the year, it's going to be harder to mentally get people to accept that higher price. So do it in the first half if you're going to put through a price increase. Another thing you can be doing is if you are setting contracts with pricing in them, with your suppliers, use the CPI. With your customers, use the producer price index. So there are two different numbers, but at the high, producer price index typically has a higher rate than the consumer price index. So it helps protect your margins just a little bit by utilizing the two different numbers to your advantage.
Good advice. We hear it every day. People are like, I just can't keep ahead of this thing. So using an index, specifically the not the consumer price index, is the way you're going. I like that a lot. Thank you.
Well, you're still going to, just to be clear, still use the consumer one for saying supplier prices in contracts. But right now, if you're saying those with the customers, you're going to use that producer one. So it's utilizing the delta between the two.
Gotcha. Thank you.
That's good. And there's kind of a theme behind a lot of my questions here, but is there some other ways that small businesses, mid-sized businesses can, what strategies they can do to deal with this inflation period?
It's going to get challenging to pass on too many price increases. During the last year and a half, we were hearing from customers who would normally pass through one price increase a year, were able to pass through 6 in the same year, just because everyone could understand the prices were going up so high. You're not likely to see that happening again. I think that period where everyone is comfortable eating those price increases is kind of going to fall by the wayside, which is why you got to put those price increases through during the first half of this year over the second half if you can. The other is be very mindful that even though we're talking about disinflation, we are not going to go back to the period of 2010s level inflation. It's going to be a higher level than you were used to in the last decade. And so you need to be planning for that through all your measures. You know, it's not just your pricing, it's all your expenses too. Just being prepared for all those things. And then specifics, I personally tell people, don't lock into just CPI or the producer price index. Look for your specific components. And you can share those once you identify them. And we help our clients do that all the time. If corn is a key piece of your business, use the corn price index to really help set your prices and pass those on. We have that data. We happily share that data with our clients so they can use it as a third party to help justify different price increases. Use the data to your advantage.
I feel like the corn price index is the most delicious of the indexes we've discussed so far.
Well, we also have some for other food groups. It depends on your preferences, but yeah, very good. It's better than the gold and silver.
That's right. So the any fan of ITR would know that while CNBC and CNN are reporting, you know, they're showing pictures of LA Harbor and shipping backed up. You guys have been, much like you're politically agnostic, you're kind of media agnostic, in my opinion, because you're going with the facts, you crazy mavericks, and you're saying, hey, record throughput, everybody, record throughput. So this supply chain thing is not going to last forever. That's the message that I have heard. I'm curious, what are you foreseeing in supply chain issues within this 2022 period?
I know we are crazy people by going with data instead of just it's a novel approach, I know, but it's worked so far. We are seeing that supply chain issues will ease in 2022. They're not going to be perfect, but it is getting better. And it's not just input we're hearing from clients, it's the indicators are suggesting it, the supply chain indicators, the leading indicators, they're all clearly identifying that this is happening. So you will still see some of those issues occurring, particularly as we're struggling with labor, just because we're seeing those issues ease. Remember, we're still short large amounts of truck drivers in this country. So until we can find other ways to transport those goods, it will still be somewhat problematic, but we're getting better. Not to go all crazy patriotic, but I am proud of what we do here in the country. I mean, this country is so good at finding solutions to problems. It's one of the things I love about human ingenuity too. So yes, there's been issues, but we find solutions to it. We find other ways of doing business and getting around the situations that are causing us problems. So it is problematic, but we're getting there.
Good.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I think that you, with your insights and working with clients, especially trying to give them the insight to where the future looks like, looking around the corner, so to speak, you probably see a lot of different ways people are handling those issues, right? And one of the ones that is an issue we've been dealing for a while, and it's going to be an issue for a long time, and that's the talent shortage and the labor shortage. And I'm curious if you're seeing anything out with clients you're working with of how they're changing or doing things differently to attract and retain great teams.
Couple different things that we're seeing than other things we're suggesting, but I fully admit Steve mentioned his daughter was graduating this spring, and I was asking what her degree was, because if it's an economist, I'm going to really be jumping all over that. We're not immune to these issues. Some of the things, though, to be very mindful are culture. Your company culture is a huge part of retaining and attracting new talent, really. That's been one of the things that's helped us not have the great resignation issue that a lot of other companies have had, is we've got a phenomenal culture that we work very hard to maintain and improve, frankly. If we're talking about millennials, because that's a big workforce right now, so that's where I'm going to focus on a few of these comments on, they want to do well. So by that, I mean, you can't pay them good enough. You have to pay them well. And that's just making sure that they're not going to leave you for a slight change in salary or the proverbial 50 cents more across the street. You have to make sure that you're paying them well so they feel the value or their worth, I should say. Another thing is they want to do good. And that goes to your culture. They want to feel that what they're doing is making a difference in the world and that you as a company are helping this world be a better place. And like one of the things we do is we partner with different charities and different organizations to raise money and try and do good in the world. Not because we know it keeps people happy here at ITR, but just because it's who we are and we like to do those things because we want to see the world improve. So those are some very key things that will help you attract the right people and really keep the right people. If you keep focusing on your culture, it's going to make it a lot harder for them to leave just for a slight change in comp when they know they're valued, they have a good work-life balance with you, and they feel like they have a home. Some creative things that we're hearing though too have to do with when they can work, how they can work. Now, how remote are you willing to let people be? Do they have to work 9 to 5? Or are you okay if it's flexible scheduling based on what's going on in their family lives or their personal lives? I mean, that makes a big difference for people too, having that flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can attest to your guys' culture. We've had an opportunity to really get to know ITR over the last year or so, and you do have a great culture and great people to work
Thank
with.
you.
Kind of sounds like a bunch of hippies up there. I don't know if I'm kept picking that up right or not, but I love it. And I think you've really just listed a lot of things that small to mid-sized business owners can do. So I'm going to ask my question, but I think, if you feel like you've already hit on it, just emphasize the point. But if there's just one thing that a business owner can focus on, because that's all they have bandwidth for this year, what should it be?
To me, the top thing is making sure you have the right people. And it's not just because of the shortage today, right? And we know that's an issue, and we just talked about some of the things you can do for it, but because we see the economy growing for the next few years. So it's going to be a slower rate of growth, like we talked about, but it will continue to grow. So if you don't have the right people in place now, you're going to be still hurting 2 years from now. You need to get those people lined up, because even if you are introducing more automation and things like that, you still need people to maintain your automation, make sure it's working. All the people parts along the process, you have to make sure they're there and well trained. So searching for ways to not just bring those people in the ways we talked about, but what sort of programs can you partner with? Are there schools you can partner with so that you are recruiting graduates right as they're coming out of school, or training programs while they're still in school even? One of the things that we get complimented on quite frequently, and I'm not trying to toot our horn, I'm just showing you it really works, is the onboarding program we've developed here at ITR is really very, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use, but it's been very well received, to put it one way. We put a lot of time and energy into making sure our team members feel that they are contributing right away from day one. We give them a lot of coaching and training and mentoring. They get a buddy the first day, then they enter our mentor program so that they constantly have skills that they're working on and someone who's always there to help them. And that's been one of the things that's really helped them feel appreciated and grow in the company. But also, we know what we do is so different. Every economist who's come to work here, they have their econ degrees, but what they learned in school is not the sort of econ we do in the real world. So we have to coach and train them all. So that's a lot of the things that every company is going to face, is making sure you have the right training programs in place to get the people to do what you need them to do. So you're really hiring for the culture. You're really hiring for that mentality and not necessarily that skill set, because those skills are really hard to find.
What's interesting is I listen to you, and as we observe what you do at ITR in particular with your own culture, Jim Collins said, get the right people on the bus, get them in the right seats. He neglected to say, you might have to develop them into a seat yourself, because there may not be ready-made bus riders out there anymore. So I love that. It just make the investment in your people. That's a great piece of advice for everyone to listen to for 22.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Jackie, we like to wrap up these podcasts mainly because Steve and I are just lazy and we can't come up with a lot of questions. We like to ask you, what's one question we should be asking you right now? What have we missed?
I would say the one question you should ask me is, we just talked about being slower growth for the next 2 years. When is the next recession? You always have to know when the next one's coming so that you're preparing, you have your markets lined up, your product mixes, figuring out how you're going to beat that next business cycle, because you need to know when it's coming, how bad it's going to be, so you're prepared. So to answer my own question that I just gave you.
Great question, Jackie.
I feel like you're the
Thank
best
you.
qualified.
Well, you can take a shot at it if you'd like. 2026. We're going to see the low of the next recession there. It's going to start 2025, but 2026 is when we're going to hit the next major low in the economy. So be ready for it. 2024, you're going to be hitting that peak. 2025 is going to be part of the downward slide. 2026 will be the low.
With that update, 26 being the low, does that move the depression 2030 number anywhere?
Oh, no, you still got that one to look forward to too.
Damn it. Okay. Well, I had to give it a shot. All right. Well, gosh, it is really wonderful to have you on the podcast. We want to have you back, but how can people learn more about ITR economics, Jackie?
Well, you can follow our blogs, as Rich was mentioning earlier, on our website, itreconomics.com. We constantly post blogs. Our speakers are all over the place. Sometimes you find them in the airport even. If you do, please send them home. Sometimes they forget where they're going. We also have our mailing lists you can get on. There's all sorts of ways. We have our monthly publications. Lots of ways to stay connected. Just reach out to us any way, shape, or form at itreconomics.com, and we'll help you find what's going to be the best fit for you.
Well, Jackie Greene, always a pleasure to talk with ITR, and it's a real pleasure to get to know you a little better. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank
Well, let's
you.
keep the conversation going, folks. Send us your questions, your stories, those best practices you're learning, your ideas, your challenges, and of course, your victories, because that is capitalism at its best. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.